right, you ready?
Sure.
Perfect. Hello, everyone out there in podcast world. I hope you're having a wonderful day. You are listening to or watching the Service Business Mastery Podcast. I'm your host, Tersh. Today's episode, it's a two-part series, and I'm super honored to have Ben here, Ben Reed with Haven IAQ products. But we're going to talk about two different things and transition them as smoothly as possible here. If you're going to be listening to this on the podcast, this will be part one of a two-part series here. And the first part is we're going to talk about how to make money with indoor air quality. And then we're going to transition as smoothly as possible. We're going to transition into how to reduce risk as a business owner by using indoor air quality. And both of these are really awesome topics. And I'm really excited to talk to Ben about this because of the product that they have and that they offer is not, it's not indoor air quality. So we're not pushing one thing over the other. And so it's a very, what I feel like it's a very non-biased conversation about pushing one product over the other, which is awesome for me. But with that being said, welcome to the show, Ben.
Thanks, Tersh. It's great to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me a little bit about, first off, about you and Haven IAQ and how you got into the entire industry.
Yeah, for myself, I guess I should say that I started my career on the telecom side. So I went to trade school for telecommunications engineering, did lots of projects in that space, even spent time doing sales, customer service, installations, engineering, like just a little bit of everything. Then I had moved into doing product development because I wanted to do something a lot more creative. And that got me working with small companies, developing prototypes. And since then, I've joined a couple of startups and have been just having a wild ride of trying to create products that can achieve a magnitude of improvement over an existing industry approach or something like that. And I feel like that's what we're going to be able to do here with Haven IAQ. Is that there's just such a massive opportunity here in the HVAC space and in buildings in general, but for us, it's residential buildings that we're super passionate about, and that's what our product's made for. It's for solving air quality in residential homes.
So, what exactly does it do?
So, our product, Haven IAQ, is a combination of a couple things. So, our innovation is around the sensing technology for particles in the air. Most particle sensors, if you have a desktop particle sensor, it has a tiny little fan in it that pushes air through a little orifice that has a couple different sensing elements that then tells you how many particles are there. And that's a really small fan with really small bearings, which wear out over time. So we created a product that goes inside of the ductwork and it uses the airflow in the ductwork to do the particle detection. So it's a solid state particle monitor with no moving parts, and we call it the central air monitor. And that device is a combination of the particle sensing technology that we've created, VOC sensors, flow sensor, temperature, humidity sensor, and then it's got Wi-Fi built into it and Bluetooth as well. And so that connects to the cloud, and the Haven IAQ cloud provides an interface for the homeowner and the technician, or rather the service company, to be able to do the installation, to get notifications of air quality events, and on the service company side, to view the data remotely and to produce reports that can help the homeowner and the contractor to come to a decision as to what types of improvements are needed for their home through long-term monitoring. So that's kind of the big distinction of our product approach compared to other IAQ monitors, is that our core philosophy is that you can't actually solve IAQ problems unless you're doing continuous monitoring, because there's so many elements in the home that change over time, like the behaviors, the seasonality of different things that are happening in the neighborhood, the equipment that's installed in the house, the age of the house. It's really, really complex. So we just believe that the key is long-term good data.
Gotcha. And that's the biggest thing for me, because a lot of times, I mean, I remember back in like 06, 07, where we were getting some of these, what was it? It was some VOC off gassing from plywood or something like that. It was crazy. And we had these monitors that were very expensive back then, and we would go and put them in a client's house for a couple of days. And, and it was crazy because like when somebody started cooking dinner, you could see it spike up and then come back down. And I was like, wow, this is awesome. But even back then, we just left it in there for a couple of days and then went back and tried getting it. Or maybe you didn't go back and get it because they never called you back or never answered the phone. And that was another challenge in itself. So I think this is awesome because it's something that stays there forever. As far as with a technician, I'm assuming that your techs would keep this on their van, keep one or two of them on their van. And, if they offered it and sold it or whatever, they would put it into the system at that time. Is that correct? It just drill a hole in it. What's the placement and all that of this device? Great question. Because it's non-typical in a couple of ways. And that's a challenge that we deal with all the time is you have the existing behavior or the existing, assumptions of how the technology and the product should work is that techs are used to taking a air monitor with them, and you don't really do the leave behind. And having a tool that you have in your truck that you take with you from job to job, that's the default behavior. And that's not how we designed our product. It is a leave behind product. Like it's a little bit more expensive than a pamphlet. But we want it to produce exponentially more value than what you would get from just leaving a pamphlet, because like those aren't always the most effective way to be able to just be like, hey, read this thing and maybe make a decision later. Instead, our product it's installed in the return duct of a home. It's only available to the Pro channel, so it's great for technicians in that you don't have to be like competing with a homeowner that looks it up online and says that, oh, I'll just buy it from Best Buy. It's like you can't. Yeah.
So it's about half-hour install. It goes into the duct. You drill a hole. We have a really nice video that kind of gives you your end-to-end installation process. And our app helps out with that installation too. We've done a huge amount of innovation in the app where during the install, it actually does like some sensor analytics of the airflow and of the other elements and even the Wi-Fi connectivity before it tells you can leave the home. So it does all of these self-tests to make sure that it's like, hey, you're going to leave this behind, but we're going to make sure that it's 100% working, that it is rock solid, so that you don't have to come back to fix a faulty product or a faulty install. Our software makes sure that the install is done right the first time. But to your point on that, like the existing paradigm of people having a tool in their house that they could, or a tool in their van that they can just use from job to job. Yes, you can install it temporarily, but that's like when you drill a hole in the duct, it's not really as temporary anymore once it's there.
Right.
And so what we encourage techs to do is that once we have a personal use program where if you can use it yourself as a technician, you get familiarized with it. You then can show your data to the homeowner and actually tell them stories, connect with them through the stories, because deep down we're all storytellers. And this is actually a thing we might touch on a few times, is how like in sales, I know that even myself, I hate sales. I've done jobs where I've had to do outbound cold calling to make sales, and oh my gosh, like there's still trauma stuck in my head from that. But people don't want to be forced to buy something that they don't need. But what everybody wants is to be able to connect through stories. That is fundamental in our human nature. And so that's kind of our big push for technicians to kind of change that behavior, to be like, don't just have one of these in your trucks that you install temporarily and then come back and get it. You install it in your own house. You prove that you're detecting these IAQ events. We have a lot of techs that like humidity is the biggest one, where they put it in. It's continuously monitoring the air in their entire home. And they're just like, well, I thought my humidity was great, but like, holy crap, it's always at 70%. So I'm going to throw in a duct mounted humidifier. And now I've just built the conviction that gives me a story to tell the homeowner, not to sell the homeowner, but to share with the homeowner how effective this product was to change my own well-being. So that's kind of our approach to like to combat the not to combat, but to transition people from believing that this is a tool that just goes in the van for a temporary reading to share with the homeowner. It's creating a long-term relationship that helps you and the homeowner truly solve problems over a long period of time.
Right. And that's what I mean, that's really cool, because like I have some of these handheld devices that you walk into the house with, and it's like, and it has the smiley face on it, or the sad face if you're in it, you know what I'm talking about. And they detect formaldehyde and stuff like that. But those sensors there, it really can fluctuate. You go to this bedroom and it might go bad, and then you go put it in a window seal and it's good, and then you put it over in that window seal and it's horrible. It's really cool that this goes into the ductwork and it's mounted there. Also, I love the fact that people might not have picked up on this, but you have the RF, the radio frequency background, so you know that the sensor is going to work properly before we leave. So I'm not getting a fault code whenever I leave there and saying connectivity issues.
Yeah, my background doing kind of some RF engineering projects, like a lot of stuff with antennas. Like last summer, we spent almost the entire summer just doing Wi-Fi optimization. So Wi-Fi gets really, really complex with, like, if you're trying to make a product that operates really smoothly. It's not like it's your antenna, it's the chip that you're using that is like that controls the radio. It's the firmware on that chip that controls the 802.11 Wi-Fi standard of like how that's implemented, how it ends up like setting up a session to connect and disconnect from Wi-Fi. So our team has put a huge amount of effort in-house. Like, it's myself and some of my other team members that are just brilliant engineers to make sure that the product is rock solid from a firmware and a hardware, like a connectivity standpoint. Because myself, having been like a telecom tech in the field, it would be like, I would just hate that product by the time I'm done with it. And to your point on like those portable monitors, super useful for being able to get a short-term diagnosis. It's kind of the difference, or similar to a doctor that you walk into a walk-in clinic and they use a stethoscope, they look inside your ear, they do the knee tap thing, and they're like, "Oh, you're not dying. Like, that's good." It is useful. It's something that you can take with you and use to help make some decisions. But just like with the kind of the medical system, you should have a family doctor, and you should be trying to benchmark over time if you are kind of getting better or worse, or kind of being able to look at your health in a holistic manner. And not just having a short-term sort of view where that a spot test is the only thing you need. So we'd like to, like, our philosophy is long-term monitoring, but spot tests are useful for making certain decisions, just like going into your emergency clinic is useful for certain situations. But
if you got a broke arm, it's obvious.
Exactly.
Broke arm.
Exactly. You have a really bad chemical problem because you just installed some, new carpet. Like, that's going to show up like on that spot tester. But what about all the other time that you don't have this HVAC technician at the house? And so we're trying to build that intelligence so that the homeowner has the peace of mind that they have the app that gives them all of the notifications and all that type of information. but then the contractor can also access the data. And so when the homeowner contacts the service company, like whether it's a part of a service contract, which is what we really encourage people to do with our product, is just integrate it into a service contract, that they should be able to have a conversation that builds trust. Because like a lot of these changes to HVAC systems, like, because I myself, I'm not an HVAC tech, but like even looking at it from my point of view as a consumer, I would be like, what the hell? Why does an HVAC system cost 20 grand? Like, that's ridiculous, because we don't think about it. It's not something that out
of sight, out of mind.
Exactly. It's and so if you can have that sort of ongoing data, have the homeowner kind of invest in that long-term monitoring solution that allows the service company to build that trust and that certainty around that, if you're going to sell them their solution for ventilation, filtration, or humidity control, why not like put the effort up front to make sure that you're solving the right problem? And spot testing, you will get the small snapshot. But for those bigger investments, that's where our product really shines, is that you're creating that, you're understanding their long-term needs and making sure that their investment is going to be worthwhile.
How long would you say, okay, say somebody comes to me and says, hey, look, and we haven't even gotten into the nuts and bolts of the topic here, but I just have lots of questions here. And we've had conversations before, but I still love asking questions to Ben and his team. How long would you say we need to have this installed in somebody's ductwork before we offer a solution to them? So like, say somebody's saying they're constantly having headaches. Like, I'm constantly having headaches. Carbon monoxide detector's not going off. We put one of these devices in. Should we leave it there for 2 months before we say, okay, here's what we found over the span of 2 months, and like we recommend an ERV or something like that? Yeah. What would you think?
So I'd say the bigger answer is like it depends, and it's complicated, but let's actually try to bring that back, because that's not the answer that we want. We want to make this easier to digest and understand. And just think of it based on severity. And if you install it, and a week later, if your readings are showing that the particle levels, chemical levels, PM levels are just ridiculous, like they're always in the poor zone, or they're always outside of the band that you want it to be for your particular climate zone, well, for humidity at least, and for particles and chemicals, there's a couple of guidelines that you just want to follow. And it's like, even after a week, you look at it and you try to find trends. And those trends can be like a couple of things. Like they could be that at certain times of the day you have spikes where, let's say, every time the person cooks, just a massive spike, but it only lasts like a minute or two. And then it goes back down to where it should be. Like for cooking, it might mean that they're properly using their hood fan when they're cooking. So that's an interesting insight to pull out of it. But when you have kind of a spike that lasts for hours on end for, let's say, PM, and it is during the time when they're cooking, and let's say they don't have a hood fan that vents to the outdoors, that's the perfect opportunity to be like, okay, in this particular situation, homeowner, like you're just polluting the crap out of your house. All you need to do is just invest in this kind of vented hood fan, and it's going to make a big difference. Ideally, it turns on automatically so that you don't even have to worry about it. But yeah, going back to the kind of that severity is it's same as that analogy with the doctor visit, is that if they see that you're bleeding out, then you're going to do something about it right away. But if there isn't something that shows up right like at that first like kind of 1 week checkpoint, then you just continue to monitor, and you try to find those trends. Like humidity is actually the best opportunity we've seen in most situations, because it's capturing air from the entire house, so it kind of balances everything that's coming into that return ductwork to kind of get the holistic picture. And that's the easiest IAQ opportunity that people use the Haven IAQ platform for, is just even after a couple of days, you see that humidity constantly high, constantly low, regardless of the season that you're in. Season is going to last for, anywhere from 3 to 6, 8 months. And
12 months if you're in South Georgia.
yeah. So you're going to want to do something about that right away. Like, it's a week of humidity data is enough to show you that there's an opportunity that you can pursue.
Yeah. So is it, I guess, regionally here in Savannah, Georgia, most everybody have one single return. Mm-hmm. Is it ideal? So what happens if you're somewhere where you have returns in every room and returns versus a single return? Does that affect product placement, or is it pretty much the same everywhere?
It does, and it kind of, you just need to. It's pretty straightforward. Is that wherever the return is in the home, if you're putting it in the ductwork only for right after the return grill for the upstairs, then you're likely just going to be getting air that is primarily from the upstairs. If the zones, like a lot of homes, if they have zones, the zones aren't like explicitly kind of separated from each other. And in that case, you will get bleed for like particles and chemicals that end up, drifting through zones. So you will be able to see kind of readings that are whole home, even if you're putting it into a single zone. But what we recommend is to be able to put it just before the filter, like maybe about 2 feet before the filter, before it hits the air handler, because we do want to make it economical for most homes. You just have one central air monitor in there before the filter, because we count the particles and we're also measuring airflow. We can predict filter lifetime. So that's another great feature for homeowners and for technicians to kind of go beyond the hey, maybe replace your filter sometime. We don't know, because for every home is different. And so because we're gathering that data, we can derive that wisdom and send that notification to the homeowner to make the change. But it's up to you.
So that's assuming that we have the air filter at the air handler. Yeah. And so can you still formulate some sort of data if the filter is in, say, a filter grill? Yeah. Like we have a 20 by 20 filter grill.
Yeah. That is a challenge that we're,
I imagine
we're dealing with. Yeah. Cause up here in Western Canada, or in a lot of Canada, we don't really do filter grills. And so it's kind of like that southeastern side of the U.S. where it's a single return with a single kind of filter grill, where our product is like, it's not quite the perfect situation for our product. But if you put the central air monitor after the filter grill, you can derive like how efficient that filter is. So many not just grills, but filter installations, there is gaps around the filter. And because the filter itself has a lot of air resistance, air wants to travel the path of least resistance. So it'll just go right around that filter. And so it can, even in those situations where you want to help convince the homeowner to make certain upgrades to their filtration, you put it in after the filter grill, and they're just like, I don't want to, upgrade this to a 2 or a 4 inch deep thing. You're just like, well, just a second, let's actually take a look at this, and then show them that it's
Since in an ideal state, it's before your 5 inch whole home filter that's at the unit, I would assume. Okay. So since it's at that point, is this something that we're going to have to pull and clean on a yearly basis? I just imagine that it can get pretty gnarly dirty if in certain situations.
So the product is really easy to clean. You don't like right now, we don't have an automated method to tell the service company if the device is dirty. We are working on a firmware feature that is actually going to do exactly that.
Cool.
Because in the situation where it does, we've had a lot of installs up here in our kind of testing with our beta testers where they can be in the duct for years at a time without being too dirty. It's really those big events, like, if you're doing drywall or some other sort of construction, or if there's a lot of, if your home is really leaky and you get a lot of road dust coming into it, then there might be a little bit of dust buildup. We've specifically designed, or we chose a plastic that it has a little bit of electrostatic properties that repels particles from gathering on it. Gotcha. And the way that the aerodynamics work.
Y'all definitely had some forethought on that,
for certain things. Yeah. And so, but to clean it, it's really, really simple, is that you just pop it, like you don't have to recalibrate it. So you just pop it out of the duct. You actually just use a little Q-tip with a little bit of isopropyl alcohol to just rub around the apertures where the sensors are, and you just stick it right back in.
Okay. So it's simple enough. And I love the fact that we talked about that it's going to show the client how much air is getting past the filter, and has a potential to share that upgrade or the need for an upgraded air filter at the unit, instead of us just going to them with pictures of a dirty evap coil and saying, hey, look, you need to change your filter more often. And you can actually go to them with data and say, look, it's going to be more beneficial if we go ahead and install this whole home media filter.
Yeah. You need to make, like again, like I said, I hate sales. I like telling stories that help people improve their life, though. And so that's kind of the approach of how with this is that either you can install it for the homeowner and say that, hey, I'm just going to leave it here for a month, and then we're going to just have conversations throughout that month. They're going to hopefully get hooked on certain things that are happening, where they get notifications when they're cooking. They're just like, hey, contractor, how do you do this? Like Zoa, so it's the company I work for, but Haven IAQ will provide some of that guidance to contractors, being like, hey, in this situation, when a customer talks to you about this is the type of conversation that you can have with them to tell them about their cooking habits, or to talk about that filter upgrade. So we're trying to produce a lot of that guidance in the next couple of months here. But yeah, leaving it for a month or so until the homeowner is convinced that they need that system upgrade or that accessory upgrade is another great strategy.
So that I don't know that we actually touched on this, but just in case we didn't, can you list out what it does actually measure?
Yeah.
So that we know, like, is it a specific VOC or does it measure viruses or like all this crazy, whatever scenario it could be.
So some of the basics of sensor technology is the more you speciate, or rather the more you try to derive or to uncover exactly what is in the air, the more expensive it's going to get, and it gets exponentially expensive. So for us, we're taking the approach of basically counting particles instead of speciating particles. So we don't know if it's viruses or if it's cat's dander or something like that. And with chemicals, we're not specifically searching for formaldehyde, but both of our sensors are able to read all of the particles and chemicals that are that should be worrisome to the homeowner and to the contractor. And that's kind of a key part of thinking about IAQ is it's not specifically about how much formaldehyde you have in the home. It should be more about how well is your home ventilated. And same with particles, is it's not specifically about how many viruses are in the air. It's how well or how good is your filtration. And those are really important conversations to have, because if you focus on being I need to know if there's viruses in the air, you're leaving out so much of the value of what can be of how to solve IAQ problems, where detecting specifically a virus with a sensor that could be connected to the internet it's an order of 10 to 20 to 30 times as expensive as what you would get with our platform. But the real, when you think about it as far as health outcomes, the filtration, ventilation, and humidity controls, regardless of what's in the air, that is the outcome, that is the solution. Those are the solutions that you need to be thinking about, instead of obsessing over whether we're detecting a virus or whether it's specifically detecting a specific harmful gas.
Mm-hmm.
It's guidelines that you don't need a $10,000 sensor.
Right.
We've created a sensor that is each one is calibrated individually off of our manufacturing line against known levels of particles. We've done third-party lab tests that make sure that our product is repeatable over and over and over again. And that's really important for long-term monitoring, is the repeatability. And so being able to use the general particle and chemical sensing as indicators for in better filtration strategies, for better ventilation strategies, that is key, because the science shows that regardless of, like, for chemicals, it's still so emergent right now in us, in our kind of civilization's understanding of how all these chemicals react with each other in the air. And so like every year there's a new study that comes out that says that, hey, this other particle or this other chemical that we have only just started studying, when it reacts with this particle or this chemical over here, it then creates this super toxic thing, which we've never found before. It's like, okay, that's great, but just bring it back home, make it simple. You just need to fix your ventilation. Like, if there's chemicals, you fix ventilation. If there's particles, you fix filtration. And that just that's it.
So when it comes to indoor air quality and having other devices added to it, should we have two devices? I mean, should we have two like Haven IAQ products? Because like one before the unit and then one further down the ductwork to see what was caught or what kind of particles are no longer in the duct, the airflow? That's
something that we've seen, like we've done ourselves, and we've seen some technicians do as well. And it's definitely not necessary. It's kind of, it's fun. Like, you get some interesting results, but almost all homes, you don't need it. It's because the, so if you have an HVAC system set up, and then you have, let's say, some return duct work, and then a whole bunch of accessories. You've got like a UV light ionizer and deep media air cleaning system and like a dehumidifier. And then you have a device like a Haven on the supply side. Yeah, you'll be able to see what is specifically now going to be supplied to the home. But it's still just, it's super valuable and more economical to just have one kind of in that return duct, because you're looking at what needs to be treated instead of what was already treated. And so as soon as you have deployed your strategies inside of the home, so if you add a dehumidifier, that device in the return duct is going to pick up those changes. It's going to show that that the humidity has been affected, and then you can tweak those settings. You can kind of just look at it over time after it's been installed to just make sure that it's working, and that'll show up on the return duct side.
Okay, cool. Obviously, we talked a lot about different things, and when it comes back, circling back around to the money-making side of things, the biggest thing to me from what I've taken away from this conversation is that you're not selling anything at this point. You're providing options to solve problems that have been discovered now that were just kind of like a maybe this is a case, maybe this isn't a case scenario. Whereas now we fully understand that our house has this problem, not that problem. So we can offer options to solve this problem over here. Yeah.
So I think what's interesting to look at is that a lot of service companies can and are making money successfully with IAQ, because there has been a shift in the consumer perspective of IAQ in the last year, especially. So we're staying home all the time, and there's an airborne disease that is super scary that we want to control and to get away from. And so everybody has been that if you're running an HVAC business, your customers are asking for either a sensor that detects particles, or a solution a sensor that detects viruses, or a solution that kills viruses.
Exactly.
So selling IAQ shouldn't be hard right now. Everybody should be able to do it. But are you solving the IAQ problem is the real question. And that's where we've seen some service companies even get in trouble for installing something where you have a claim.
Promising one thing, over promising, and then all of a sudden someone gets sick, and then you're like, oopsie.
And here comes the lawyers. Yeah, and the good service companies, they are doing it for the best of intentions. It's not about just trying to sell something to make a profit. There are people out there that do that. But for most service company owners, like that's not how to create repeatable business. And so what's happened with IAQ from me looking at it is that a lot of these, whether it's service company technician, salesman, or the business owner, IAQ has become a bit of a liability. It's become a risk because you can make money selling IAQ because everybody wants it. But how do you make money in such a way that you are not putting your business at risk and you're not putting the homeowner's health at risk? That's kind of, for us, that's super, super important to be thinking about. And I don't think you can do that without long-term data, because you install something and maybe at the time of you put in an ionizer or something like that, and you kind of now have that fresh air smell. And so it seems like you've been able to solve the problem, but there's even emergent science about that kind of ionization side of things, where there are certain weird byproducts of chemicals in the air when whatever is produced from that electronic air cleaner, it reacts with certain types of chemicals in the air, which in some homes, those chemicals are more prevalent than others. And then the outcome is this new derived, chemical concoction that can almost be more harmful to the homeowner's health. And how do you know that that's happening or not? And that's why you need that data. You need to be able to view it.
As you can tell, this conversation flows very well. So there's not really a great spot to stop and take a break. So I'm just going to stop us right here. As I mentioned earlier in the episode, this is going to be a 2-part series simply because of the length of the conversation. We've got, tons of information, great information between Ben and myself. So I'm going to leave the rest of the reducing risk for part 2. Now, there is going to be some more about making money as there was some about reducing risk in the first episode, or part 1 of this series. But that's just kind of how our conversation went. And so here we are, the end of part 1. So I hope you I hope you follow along for part 2. And thank you again for listening to this episode of the Service Business Mastery Podcast. It is a podcast focused on service business owners, managers, and technicians who are considering becoming business owners themselves. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to Ben, HavenIAQ.com. Follow their Instagram page, connect with them. Follow me on Instagram, Tersh Blissett, at Tersh Blissett, or at Service Emperor. Thank you again for listening to this episode, and I hope you have a wonderful and safe week. Until we talk again next week, see ya.